Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about books and series that I wanted to get to in 2024, but simply just either ran out of time or I had a slight change of heart about. Please let me know what you didn't get to this year in the comments down below, and let me know which one of these books or series on this list that you think I should make a priority going into 2025. I'll be making that video here sometime pretty soon, so I would love any feedback that you guys have. So let's go ahead and get right into it with this list, and the first three are going to be books that I just kind of had a slight change of heart about. These were books that at one point, or series, that I was very enthusiastic about and really wanted to read and was very excited, and for whatever reason that kind of just waned. And the first one up on this list is The Wandering Inn by Pirate Abba. Now, I know this is a really beloved series here on BookTube, and like the fans of the series are ravenous, and I totally get that. And part of the reason that I kind of moved away from wanting to read this series is, one, because it is just so long. And I know people are going to tell me, don't worry about catching up. It's worth it. The journey is worth it and all of this stuff and everything. But I will say, while I think endings are slightly overrated, I do think like having a concise story that I'm going to be able to get to at some point that isn't going to be my only reading focus is something that like I do try to find. It's not something that I go out of my way. Like, I wouldn't tell you to not read A Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire just because it's not done, but also committing to like the longest series that has ever been published or is out there on the internet. It just is something that has, kind of pushed me away from it. The other problem that I'm currently having with The Wandering Inn is some people whose opinion I normally align with have spoken about this book in a way, or the series in a way, that I don't think it's going to be for me. It almost sounds like it's too much of a slice of life format, and I'm not sure that's going to be something that I'm going to want to deal with and spend that much time. I've heard this series from Brian over at BellTube referred to The Wandering Mid, I believe he has called it, and while I can understand why people would like this, I think I might lean more with Brian here, just from some of the things I've heard about this series. Now, definitely give me your best sales pitch. I'm not saying it's an impossibility that I'll never read this series, but it is just one that this year I kind of just made the realization that it's probably not one that is going to be a priority for me, and probably is going to be one that I don't read. But like I said, definitely give me your best sales pitch down below. Now, the next series is actually coming just from what I've heard people say about it after the fact. So the Powder Mage trilogy by Brian McCullum is a series that I was super hyped to. I really wanted to get into like a flintlock fantasy. I wanted to experience fantasy that was kind of in a different setting and all these things. And the more I have heard about this series, it really sounds like it starts super strong and then just falls off really, really fast. And that is also, once again, coming from people whose opinion I really trust, and I tend to align with how they feel about books. Now, obviously not everything is going to be 100% with somebody else, but unfortunately Powder Mage sounds like one of those series that I'm not going to like. I will say the fact that this is a shorter series does give me a little bit of hope of at least trying it, and I guess I could always try book one for anything that I'm going to talk about here today, and then, see how I feel about it personally. But my reading time is limited, so I do try to, make these kinds of choices, and for some reason I think that the Powder Mage trilogy is just going to be one that is on the chopping block, though I do think that kind of setting is interesting, so I might check out, what is it, Guns of the Dawn by Tchaikovsky, who is an author I have struggled with. I haven't really had any bangers from him just yet, so definitely, once again, Powder Mage I think is going to be one that I just had a slight change of heart on. I don't think I'm as excited for it anymore, and it's just not going to be one that is for me. And the last series I'm going to have in this change my mind category is Discworld, and if you have followed my channel at all, you know that this really isn't me changing my mind as much as I really don't think I'm going to like much of Discworld. There might be, obviously there's 40 something books in Discworld, there's probably a book or two I would end up liking in it, but the series as a whole I think is just something that I've kind of shipped the idea of ever trying to do. And at one point I was kind of enthusiastic of reading this like staple of the fantasy genre. Once again, I've been told that the humor isn't exactly the same as a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but that kind of dry British humor, absurdism kind of stuff, the more I have read that kind of humor and stuff, the less it works for me, and the more I realize that it just isn't for me. Now, I once again am totally open for suggestions of maybe some sub-series inside of Discworld. Like I said, it's such a big series. I'm sure there are some individual books that I would like in there, and I would love suggestions for which ones that maybe aren't so wild and zany and dry British humor, and just those are kind of the things that do not work for me. So I would, like I said, I'm sure there's a book in there that will work, and I just need to figure out what it is. But the idea of going through and reading all of Discworld, which I had kind of put as an idea in my head at one point, I think is not going to happen at this point. Okay, and now let's go ahead. I'm sure there are some angry people after talking about those. So the next ones are just going to be series or books that I wanted to get to and just kind of ran out of time and didn't prioritize them probably the way that I should have. And the first one on this list is going to be a series that I have wanted to read for so long. I have been paying attention to this series, I think since book 2 came out, and that is the Sun Eater series. I don't know why I haven't read this series yet. Everything I hear about it, this is going to be like a top 5 series all time for me. Everything about it is something that I think I'm going to really enjoy, and yet for some reason I keep pushing it off. And this is something that I know about myself that I do quite frequently, where I know there are going to be books that I really like, and so I don't read them until I really feel like I need to, or really like am drawn to it. I did that with the Cosmere for years. I had heard about Sanderson forever, and I just kept pushing it off until I finally took the plunge and just dove straight in. And Sun Eater is really the best next example of that, where I have known about this series for an extremely long time. I feel like I was an early adopter without actually reading this series, which is kind of a funny thing to think about, that I could have been on the forefront of such a popular series at this point, and yet I have still not read anything. I actually own, I think, all of the books at this point, and yeah, it's just been sitting in my audio library just waiting for me to decide to take the plunge. And yeah, maybe 2025 will be the year. Another series that I think I own all of the books except for maybe the most recent one, this is the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. This is another one of those series where I have known about it for a really long time. I'm a big fan of Hunger Games. Obviously the first book is like sci-fi Hunger Games, or at least that's kind of what it's sold to people as. And for whatever reason, this is another one. I hear that the first trilogy is different than the second one, and how it really gets dark, and there's all these things and these character arcs and how brilliant it is and all these things. I think this is another series that has so many great things in it that I will like, and for whatever reason, I think maybe part of the reason I have put it off is I'm kind of want to binge it. And so with the last book soon to come out, maybe 2025, I've kind of pushed it down a little bit, even though I want to read it and I should. Now, the next series was in contention for being my next big long fantasy series that I was going to read in 2024, and it lost out to Malazan, and I probably shouldn't have, because I'm talking about the Realm of the Elderlings, and this is a 16 book long fantasy series, but because it is split into all those subcategories or sub-series, it's probably one that I should have started. I definitely could have read like Assassin's Apprentice, the first 3 books, and then not worried about reading Live Ship for a little while and all other things. So once again, this is another one where I think it just comes down to priority, and at some point you kind of have to pick and choose series. I currently have, obviously the Cosmere is going on. I'm reading Wind and Truth right now, but you know, that's kind of the end of the Cosmere for right now. Obviously we're going to constantly get more things, but like, we'll see how that goes. I'm also in the middle of the Wars of Light and Shadow by Janny Wirth, so I'm prioritizing that, and also Malazan. And so I think Realm of the Elderlings can still fit in there somewhere. I think there's a way to make that happen. I just probably need to plan a little bit. And for whatever reason, of the great big fantasy epics that seem to be out there, it is the one that has just kind of gotten the short end of the stick. And I see people like John over at Talking Story absolutely love Assassin's Apprentice and those first couple books and just rave about them and talk about how good they are. There's other people here on BookTube who always are, you know, championing Robin Hobb, and so I feel like maybe she's one who I should put, you know, bump up my list a little bit more, but my time is limited. So definitely, once again, best sales pitch down below in the comments, because it is one I would like to get to, but I'm afraid that it just hasn't, you know, gotten me there just yet. Next up is a hard sci-fi series, and I believe these can also be read as kind of standalones. I think there's a certain way you're supposed to read it, and I'm talking about the Culture series by Iain M. Banks. This is one of those pillars of sci-fi that I feel like I need to get to and read. One thing that has kept me away, obviously, is the time element, but it is a series that intimidates me a little bit. I feel like it's just this big epic thing that things are interconnected, and you just need to know what's going on, and all, you know, all these kinds of things. And so I think that's another reason why I have stayed away from it, outside of just not making it a priority. But it's one of those series like Malazan that I pushed off for a really long time just because it was intimidating to me. So we'll see if maybe that can be one. And like I said, I think because I can read those maybe as more standalone kind of books, that it is one that it's easier to throw in than some of the other things that I have mentioned, but we will see there. Another one is the Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. I have been familiar with Ken Liu because he is the translator for my favorite series of all time, The Three Body Problem, and so I have known about this series, I think, since book 1 came out. Once again, it's one of those ones where I keep saying it's going to be something I love, and yet again, I keep pushing it off. I see all the beautiful editions that are out of it, and I have to keep stopping myself from buying it because I haven't read it yet. And I always feel really weird buying special edition books for a series I haven't read yet. And so I see, especially that Midnight, the purple Dandelion Dynasty books look so amazing. I would love to have this on my shelf, but it's one thing that I always tell myself, that if I haven't read anything in it yet, I can't buy it yet. If I read at least one, so like if I had read The Grace of Kings, I would let myself buy it. But because I haven't even done that yet, I feel like I can't justify buying it. So hopefully this is another series that I can get to, but we will see. It is one that seems to just get pushed down the list again and again and again, so we'll have to see. And the last 3 books I'm going to mention are actually all standalone, so well, I guess technically Lonesome Dove will be the first one I talk about. It is a series, but it can absolutely be read as a standalone. Lonesome Dove, I've heard so many people whose opinion I value and trust and agree with talk about how amazing of a story Lonesome Dove is. I had a great experience with a Western this year in All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy. Obviously this is a different kind of Western than that. You could almost say that McCarthy is anti-Western sometimes with some of his Westerns, but from everything I've heard about Lonesome Dove, it just seems like it's the greatest character story ever told, and you just feel like you're with these characters, that you know them better than anything else. And yet it is a story that I've pushed down. This is actually one that has been on my list since I kind of got back into reading. When I got back into reading, I just did the basic books you should read, best 100 books, 50 books everyone should read, those kinds of lists. And Lonesome Dove was on it countless times, and I think I just didn't read it because it was a Western, and then I kept hearing more and more people talk about it, and it's absolutely one that I probably should have picked up by this point, but here we are. The penultimate book here is Swan Song by Robert McCammon. Robert McCammon wrote Boy's Life, which is one of my favorite books of all time. I absolutely loved that book, and I've heard Swan Song is also just like this grand epic by him that is amazing. And part of the reason why I have not read this one is because I want to read it and The Stand kind of close together. Because they're compared against each other so much, I kind of want to read them close and see how similar are they, how different are they, do they deserve to be compared, like that kind of thing. And because I wanted to read a bunch of King before I got to The Stand, it kind of pushed this book down the line. So it's kind of a funny thing that this book has been stalled by a completely different author that has nothing to do with Robert McCammon himself. But nonetheless, that is part of the reason why I have pushed it down. And I don't know if I almost want to just kind of push it to the side completely to do all of my King reading, but I feel like that would be doing a disservice to an author who wrote one of my favorite books of all time. So we'll have to see there. And then the last book I will have to mention here, if you have watched any of my TBRs, this is a book that has been on almost every TBR this year in 2024, and that is Starship Troopers. I have planned on reading this book, like I said, countless times. I think in probably 7 out of the 12 TBRs I did this year, Starship Trooper is on that list, and I always leave it as though if I have time at the end of the month, I'll go ahead and start it. And believe it or not, I never have time at the end of a month to go ahead and throw in a random book. And so Starship Troopers just keeps getting pushed down, and so I almost feel like it should be the first book I read in 2025, but that's probably not going to be the case. But that is what I haven't gotten to here in 2024. These were all books that at one point or another I definitely planned to, at least starting this year. Obviously I didn't plan on finishing all those super long series, but definitely let me know what you didn't get to. Let me know what I should prioritize. Like I said, I'll be making my top priority books for 2025 video here pretty soon. I'd love any input that you guys have, and any series that you really think that you want to hear me talk about and all that kind of stuff. But that's all for me, and as always, have a good one.